funny because I talk in chapter one of the book on career plans
Yeah.
that you need to have a plan. You can't just float around. But importantly, just like our project plans at work, they're not set in stone. And you don't say, well, this is my plan. That's not part of it. I'm ignoring it. What was supposed to be a one-off meeting turned into this whole other path. And so you need to be open to opportunities and adjust your plan as you go. That's how you find opportunity, and that's how you capitalize on it.
Living podcast, where we inspire and empower you to live your best audacious life ever. Followers of the podcast know that I'm a big fan of analogies. I think they tell a vivid story. And in this analogy, I'm going to compare life to the game of chess, where strategic moves and thoughtful planning can lead to all sorts of success. And just like in chess, navigating our career path requires careful consideration and planning. And today we have a very special guest who excels in helping individuals navigate their careers with intention and strategy. Mark Herschberg is an accomplished author, educator, and technology executive with a wealth of information in the tech industry. Now, Mark has dedicated his career to helping individuals develop essentials for success that are often overlooked in traditional education. He's here to share his knowledge and insights. And so without any further ado, here is my conversation with Mark Herschberg. Enjoy. Hey, Mark, thank you for being here today with me on the Audacious Living podcast. It's a pleasure to connect with you like this, my friend.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. It is my pleasure to be here.
Awesome. I continually say I take so much pleasure. I feel like I'm the lucky guy. Like I get to connect with all sorts of individuals, all sorts of backgrounds, who are just eager to share and pass along their insights and knowledge. And so I thank you for this. I think in your space, particularly around the world, the career development, career advancement work that you do in helping people, I can't think of a field where you didn't have to demonstrate this form of audacity that we talk about, right? And put yourself out there and take risks and take chances to go after that thing you're after, a job that you want, if you will. So maybe as a starting point to get our listeners up to speed, I get you to start to talk about the work that you do and what got you to this place.
Sure. I've got this really interesting dual career track.
Okay.
When I came out of MIT back in the 90s, I started as a software developer.
Okay.
And this was during the dot-com era. So I was into tech startups and I wanted a career in technology. In fact, I realized early on that I wanted to become a CTO, a chief technology officer.
Okay.
I recognized that to get that job, it wasn't just being the best engineer I could be, using what I had learned in school. There were a bunch of other skills I would need. Okay. Leadership, negotiating, team building, communication, hiring, all these things, and no one ever teaches that to you. So I had to upskill myself. And in doing so, I recognized these skills aren't just for executives, they're for everyone. And I began to upskill my team. Now, I went on to have a very successful career that I still have in technology. Mm-hmm. These days, I'm a fractional CTO, CPO, so I build different tech companies. I've been at classic startups, at Fortune 500s. But along the way, a funny thing happened. MIT got similar feedback. And MIT heard from companies, we want to see these skills in the people we hire, not just your students, not just college students, not just engineers, but everyone. And we can't find it. So MIT said, all right, well, we have to start teaching this to our students. And when I heard about this, I said, well, I've developed some content for my team. Why don't you take it? If it's helpful, great. And I thought that'd be it, one and done. But instead, MIT said, hold on a second, can you stay and help develop more content? And as I did that, they said, how about you help teach this? So I continue to have my tech career, but in parallel, I've now been teaching for over 20 years at MIT. I've taught some other schools. And then, of course, that led to, I want to reach a larger audience. So I put out the book, the Career Toolkit. And then I built the Brain Bump app to help people further develop and use these skills. And I do speaking and other things as a second career in parallel to my tech career.
Just as you planned it, right?
Well, it's funny because I talk in chapter one of the book on career plans that you need to have a plan. You can't just float around. But importantly, just like our project plans at work, they're not set in stone. And you don't say, well, this is my plan. That's not part of it. I'm ignoring it. What was supposed to be a one-off meeting turned into this whole other path. And so you need to be open to opportunities and adjust your plan as you go. That's how you find opportunity, and that's how you capitalize on it.
Well, it's interesting because I find when you stay open to new opportunities, that's where the most uniqueness, is that a word? I'm not sure that's a word. I'm making it up. The most unique career trajectories, like in your case, like something that because I was facetious about it was part of your plan, but I mean, there's no way you saw this coming, right?
Absolutely not. And if you had asked the kid who graduated from MIT years ago, would you ever be teaching soft skills? He will have looked at you and laughed and said, why would I ever do that? They're not important. But I was lucky to recognize their importance, and then lucky to have the opportunity to help other people develop them.
I wonder if that kid would even know what soft skills are. And although I asked that question jokingly, I think it's very real, because for a long time, they didn't have a term soft skills. They were just stuff people did, or certain people in certain positions did, right?
I knew the term, and regardless of the label, we've all heard of these skills.
Yeah.
You're never going to say, networking, what's that? What kills me, though, we've all heard about networking. I remember my parents telling me, and teachers, and everyone says it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yep.
Everyone's telling you about this, but no one's actually saying, and here's how to do it.
Right.
If you think about it, we've had more formal training in how to tie our shoes than how to network. And that's insane.
I like that. I like that. And some of us are still struggling with tying our shoes, man. That's why they got Velcro. but it's okay. So let's zero in on networking for a second, because there's an aspect in all soft skills. There's layers to them, right, Mark? Like networking, also encompasses your ability to manage relationships or maintain relationships. I would say confidence is a part of networking. Like there's all these layers that are compounded on this that makes soft skills harder than people realize.
Yes and no. You are right that they're not isolated. It's not as if, well, I know chemistry, but I don't know history. And that's okay. I can do chemistry without history, or vice versa.
Right.
A good leader, for example, knows how to negotiate. A good negotiator knows how to communicate. All these things build upon each other. But here's the analogy I use. Learning these skills, the mistake we make is we normally learn the way we learn history or chemistry, which is we sit there and the teacher, or if you're listening to a podcast or webinar, says, here's the information, write this down. What are the 3 steps to network? What are the 4 rules of leadership? Oh, okay, I'll write this down, I'm good. It doesn't quite work that way. I use the analogy that's more similar to sports.
Okay.
Let's take basketball. I can teach you the rules to basketball, a sport I know you know well. I can teach you the rules to basketball in 30, 45 minutes.
Right.
Okay, I got the rules. Now I'm ready to play. I'm going to be a champion. Instead, you need to practice. Now, how do we practice? Mm-hmm. We start with drills. Just practice passing. That's it. Don't even worry about the rest of it. Just focus on this one thing and build that muscle memory.
Yep.
Then we might run some plays. Then we're going to scrimmage to really practice in a game setting, because even if you can do it in theory in the drill, it's different during the game. Gotcha. And even real games are different. And what do? We get coaching. We get feedback. We'll watch the tape. We'll reflect. And that's really how we learn these skills, because I can tell you, well, here are some things you can do. There's no 3 rules to do one of these skills, right, but here's some approaches. We can practice that individually. We can practice it holistically, and let's get that feedback. And that's how we improve, by practice.
And that's the part that I think where people have to exercise some grace on themselves, because anything that you start for the very first time, you're not going to be good at it. Like, you're just not. You're going to suck. You might want to give up early on. Who knows? There's a bunch of things that may be happening, but we have to understand that at the very beginning, we'll need some time. And that's why you hear the expression, taking baby steps has to come into play, because it's just, there's a learning curve, right?
Absolutely. But Let me give you an example of how even those small steps can be impactful.
Okay.
Suppose you're 25 years old and you've just learned a little about negotiating. Maybe you
Okay.
read the chapter in my book, maybe you read a different book or took a class. This is something you can do in a matter of hours. The chapter in my book you can read in less than an hour,
Okay.
but maybe a class takes a few hours. You're 25 years old and you have a job offer for $60,000. Instead of just accepting that job, you say, wait, I've learned to negotiate. I'm going to employ some of these principles. And you negotiate and get $61,000.
Okay.
That's not a huge lift. That seems doable. That might be a single phone call or conversation or a few emails back and forth. It's going to take you all of 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay.
If you do nothing else, now you're not a master negotiator. You just did that one little negotiation, small, tiny incremental amount. If you do nothing else, if you stay in that job for the next 40 years until you retire, you just got yourself $1,000 more for 40 years. That one tiny negotiation just got you $40,000, which is a huge return.
Right. Right.
But of course, you're not staying in that job for 40 years. You're getting raises, promotions. You're negotiating bigger compensation. You're negotiating a bunch of other things as well, having nothing to do with your compensation.
Right.
So if you get just a little bit better at negotiating, you can literally add 6 figures, even potentially 7 figures to your lifetime earnings. And now here's the secret. We can do the math with negotiation. And it's very easy. Okay, I got this much for this many years. The same is actually true for all of these skills. It's not that someone says, oh, you're a slightly better leader, so here's $1,000 more. But if you stand out as a slightly better leader, you will be put on the better project. You will get promoted slightly faster. You will get the job ahead of the other person.
Right.
If you're a slightly better networker, you will get more opportunities. You will get more information coming through your network. Each of these skills getting just a little bit better has this massive compounding effect on your career. So you're right, we have to give ourselves some grace. But the good news is, even the small baby steps can really propel you forward.
That really speaks to the power of just incremental growth, right? It really, really does. And it doesn't have to be massive, cavernous, huge leaps that we sometimes need to happen, or slapping a home run out of the park, to use a baseball analogy, right? It can be something small and simple and easy, but they still, I think from my perspective, as long as we're pointed in the right direction and we're making a step, then it's all good.
Absolutely. Just make some forward progress at whatever speed works for you.
Got you. So, okay. So chapter 1, it's about career planning, right? So I've got, this is this career that I'm after. This is where I want to be. That plan, I would assume, would include things like, do I need more education? Do I have the right credentials? Do I have the right essential skills? Are there other things that are important to incorporate in that plan?
You're on the right path. Now, I grew up a chess player, and what we teach you in chess is don't just think one move ahead.
Okay.
Think multiple moves ahead. Don't look at what your next job is. Think further down the road, because too many people think, well, one day I hope to make director or vice president, maybe in 10 or 15 years. And that's your entire plan. That's insane. You'd never have a project plan saying, well, maybe in a year's time, the project will be done. Everyone cross your fingers and hope we do it. So, no, let's create a plan to get from here to there. Okay. We're going to define where there is and create that plan. So if you want to be a VP in 15 years, okay, that's where I want to be. Where do I need to be in 12 years or 10 years? Because you can't just go from here to there. You need that intermediary step.
Right.
Well, to get to that step, where do I need to be in 6 or 7 years? So you want to backtrack to those milestones. Then what you can do is say, for that next job, the one I might take in 3 or 4 years, what are the requirements for that job? Whether it's experience or skills or accomplishment or knowledge, what do I need to qualify? Where am I today? And what is that gap? Mm-hmm. And then once you know the gap, you might say, I do need to take extra training or certifications, or maybe I need to be on certain projects to hit certain goals that I can show my manager to get the promotion. Yep. So you just want to be very specific. You don't just want that, well, I hope it happens. Create that plan. Right. And as we said at the start, it's not set in stone, so you can refine it as you go.
The sector that you're in? I mean, is there any difference between sectors, Mark? Like, I mean, whether you're in the healthcare or engineering, IT, or government, like, is there the process? Does it change, or are there nuances that are good to have for people to have, or good things that people to know?
There may be some nuances specific to your industry. In some extreme cases, if we take government,
Okay.
certainly government, at least here in the US, you have a bureaucracy, you have unions, and there are certain rules about how fast you can be promoted. At the higher levels, promotions are political, so it's a whole different game. That's different from other industries. And even then, when you get into the private sector, you might have a fast growth industry. At the time we're recording this in late 2023, AI is the big fast industry. And so you can get in early and potentially just rise as the tide rises. If you have a more stagnant industry, in that case, it might be you have to work your way up, you have to pay your dues. Certain cultures might be different. On Wall Street, if you're bringing in the money, they don't care how much experience you do or don't have. It's just all about the bottom line.
Yeah.
In consulting, on the other hand, there are certain milestones and checkpoints. In fact, at a certain point, you might need to get an MBA. That's just almost a requirement to make it to a certain level. So you just have to understand within your industry, talk to people who are further down the path and ask them, what are these unwritten rules? What are the things I need to look for on that journey?
And those conversations that could be had through information interviews, could they not?
They can through informational interviews, but I wouldn't just rely on that because companies can be a little guarded.
Gotcha.
Companies might not tell you, we really need to see you here at 9 o'clock every night. Honestly, companies should, because they should be honest.
Yes. Right.
If you're not ready to do it, that's fine. Not a
Right.
fit for either side, and let's not waste each other's time. But companies
Right.
don't always do that. This is where you want to use your network and reach out and meet people in the field and learn about the role. And that's going to give you deeper insights. You can use informational interviews as well, but don't discard your network. Your network's not just for finding
Gotcha.
jobs, it's for gathering information.
So on information interviews, then what do you see the true value in terms of what they serve and how they can help someone?
I think informational interviews, honestly, the way I've seen most people use them, it's pretty poor. It's
Okay.
usually people, it's a holdover from almost the pre-World Wide Web days. So
Okay.
I remember in the 90s, we'd have these because I don't know much about this company and
Right.
it's hard to find out about. Now you can learn a lot, whether you're Googling the company or doing other web searches, looking at their social media posts, going to websites like Glassdoor and just seeing what are people saying about, or just hearing people talk about the industry in general.
Gotcha.
When you do have an informational interview, there are questions you should be asking specifically, I would recommend about the culture. Now, here's something that trips a lot of people up. We focus on the tasks in the role. And honestly, the tasks you probably know. In my field, for example, software engineering, you're writing code, you're sitting in daily stand-up meetings, you're writing Jira tickets, you're doing some QA. You don't need to put those bullet points. If you're a coder, you're a coder. Every coder knows how it works.
Right.
But where it gets tricky, certainly when you get to more middle management positions, you're a director or a VP.
Yep.
Okay, you're supervising coders or accountants or supervising whatever field you're in. But what does that mean? Consider, for example, a marketer who's running a team of 10 people. Now, she might spend most of her time hands-on with her team, helping them create email campaigns because the company is primarily about email marketing.
Yep.
And 70% of the time it's email marketing, 20% might be social media, and 10% others. On the other hand, the same director running a same size team somewhere else could be spending 10% of her time overseeing the team doing email campaigns. It could be 50% event marketing. There could be some other types of marketing. In my role as a CTO, I've been in companies where they expect me to be in the code a lot.
Gotcha.
And that's my primary job. And other ones, I'm external. I'm meeting with customers. I'm meeting with partners. And I'm spending a lot of time externally. Now, in both cases, the bullet lists look very similar.
Yes.
The bullet lists all say you're supervising code and you're meeting with partners,
Right.
but those ratios are very different and the expectations are different. Even things like, is this a company that has lots of meetings or prefers emails? That's actually important to our happiness, but that's not in the job description.
Gotcha.
So what I recommend, I have on my website, there is
Mhm.
a free download on the questions you should be asking during the informational interview or just whenever it's appropriate in the process. Questions about culture and style. What's the style of your manager? What's the culture of the company? This trips people up. So I also include how to ask, but here's the easiest way you can ask if you're not comfortable with any of the others. You can say, hey, there's this guy. His name is Mark Herschberg. He wrote a book. I heard him on a podcast, and he said, we together should go through these questions to make sure we're on the same
Ah,
page. You
ah,
can blame me.
I
And this
like
way, if they
that.
push back, they're like, these questions are stupid. You go, oh, yeah, you're right. They're stupid. That guy's stupid. Fine.
Right,
And you don't
right.
feel like you put yourself out there, but you can use me as the motivation so you don't feel like you're taking the risk.
Mark, I love the way you put yourself out there like that. You go the step beyond, right? You're not just writing a book and giving. You're going to take an extra mile. I love that. So I thank you, and I'm sure our listeners would appreciate that as well. You do though talk about something really interesting when you sort of touch on the corporate culture. You know, I can remember very early in my career, and I really thought about those things. It was always, hey, I got to get that and go here, and I got to go here, and I got to go here. And it was a lot of jumping and bouncing, if you will. That, at least that my initial interest was. I didn't put a whole lot of thought into stuff around culture. And it wasn't until sort of later on in your work career, you're like, yeah, you know what? Culture does matter. Culture is important. What other aspects are out there that feed into a culture and a work experience for individuals?
It is really culture, but what culture means can be very different.
Okay.
Most companies think culture, it's the 6 values we put on our website, customer first and excellent service. And that is part of it. But the true culture is what you yourself are facing every day at work. Now, it might be in every meeting, someone
Yep.
says, okay, I like this idea. How does this deliver customer value? Great. You are living to the culture value that you are putting on your website. But the reality is, you might also be in meetings where the loudest voice wins. I've heard this from many people.
Mm,
That's part of your culture. That might not be on the website, but that's the culture. You need to learn to scream and shout.
gotcha.
There might be some cultures where it really is the manager and whoever he or she has as the trusted advisors, and it's not the best idea
Yep.
or majority vote. It's getting the right people to buy into your idea.
Right.
And that's the culture, pulling the right strings. You can argue these are good or bad, or certain cultures make more sense. I'm not going to argue what culture is best, but it's important to understand real culture is what you're dealing with day to day. It is often the unwritten rules of our work.
But also, Mark, isn't that part of that culture thing based on what really matters to me? Like, isn't we talk about workplace culture, and so the discussion of what's good or bad will ultimately be judged and determined by myself and what's important to me, wouldn't it?
But when you say myself, who are you referring to? The candidate, the CEO, the manager? All these people have opinions.
That's true.
Right? The CEO might say, here's our formal culture, and we've put it on our website.
Yeah.
But the manager you work with day to day has her own style,
Gotcha.
right or wrong. And that's the culture you're living in. And you have your preferences, right or wrong. The question is, how well does it align to all of the other cultural overlays
Gotcha.
in the work environment you're in?
Yeah, fantastic point. Um, I'd love to talk about the interview process and things that are maybe good things to do as part of as an interviewee, if you will. I find it really interesting now. You're seeing a lot more of these virtual interviews. You know, you don't have that I was going to say face to face. You do, but it's through a screen. I mean, you and I are face to face, but where it's virtual. That certainly does something in terms of the dynamics. It changes things. I know for myself, I love face-to-face engagement, but I also know there's some things that I lose when it's virtual. And then the other thing that I've noticed is a lot more interviews are more behavioral based, right? They'll give you a lot more. Give it a scenario, you did this, and then, right? Because it's the impression I've received or I tend to get is that it's what you know is important without question, but there are a lot of things companies are willing to teach people, right? If they have the right person that's coachable and teachable and good attitude and all those sorts of things. Or if you can just sort of comment on that.
Sure. I'll take the second part first
Sure.
on behavioral interviews.
Yeah.
Knowledge is easier to come by. And I think back to the 90s where you either knew how to do something or you didn't.
Great.
And there were ways you could learn. I think in my own field of software, there were journals. There were the monthly magazines you could subscribe to.
Mm-hmm.
And in the magazines, they'd have columns about here's a new technique and try doing this. Oh, okay, this is great.
Right.
Nowadays in software, if you're stuck on any bug, you put in a web search and you go to some website, often at Stack Overflow, and someone has asked the same question, someone else has answered it. And whether I know how to use some library or some technique or how to deal with some bug, I can find that information at low cost. So you're not hiring me because I just happen to have a bigger bag of information than the next person. The marginal opportunity to get information has really dropped to near zero.
Gotcha.
But how you think, that is harder to change. It can be done,
Sure.
but that's what you look for. And you say, can you think about this problem the right way? Because I'll give you the information. And when I hire people, I'm hiring them for 3 or 4 years. If I have to spend a month training you up, I'm probably okay with that if I feel you are sufficiently smarter or more capable than the next candidate. Most people are on a bell curve. Most people are average, and then you have people going out to the extremes. In software engineering, and I use these examples just because that's where I have the data, but this probably applies to other fields. In software engineering, studies that they did showed the top half of the bell curve was twice as productive as the bottom half. And the top 10% were significantly more productive than even the average people. They're typically not costing 2 or 3 or 4 times as much, even if their productivity is that much better. So we're looking for those really top people because we get a better return for the maybe double the cost. We might get 3 times the output, but that's not, do you have this knowledge? Yes or no. Right. It's how well do you think?
Focus on the way you think.
And now there's a first part to the question having to do with virtual interviews. I've been running remote teams since 2005. Okay. Or at least some of my teams have been remote. I've been at fully virtual companies since 2017. Okay. So I've been doing this for a while. Okay. And you're right that I've done video interviews with people and they seem fine on video, but in person, the dynamics were just different. So there is something there, and I haven't yet pinned down what exactly that is or how to find it. I'm still working on that. Okay. I do recommend having multiple people involved because you're just going to better triangulate on the person and get better perspectives. I would say, remember that when we're doing remote interviews, there's less information coming through. You see less body language. Gotcha. You see less happening. So as a candidate, you want to be, I'm going to say, overly expressive. That doesn't mean bigger hand gestures, but you want to vocalize more, you want to express more, you want to think through things and show them what you're doing. Especially, for example, I've done whiteboard exercises where, okay, I can see what you're doing at the whiteboard. Well, I can't see the whiteboard, probably the piece of paper you have next to your screen. I can't see how you're thinking through it because you're not holding it up as we're doing this. So talk through and say, okay, well, so I'm going to start thinking this way, and here's what I'm writing down. I'm doing it like this. And well, maybe that's not working. I'm going to think this way. Just be more expressive to account for the more narrow communication channel.
Yeah, the expressiveness is certainly something that I like to be expressive, so it's more natural to me, I think. But for those that aren't, I think that's where that will kind of a challenge, if you will, right? Because it's not, because if it's not, that's not how you naturally are. Yeah, you really have to work to get there, don't you?
You do, and even in-person interviews, this can matter. What I tell people, when you get a brain teaser problem, you don't just sit there for 2 minutes and then say, here's the answer, because you may get it, you may not. We're less concerned about the answer than how you think. So even in person, you want to talk through what you're thinking. We're not going to penalize you if your first thought goes down the wrong way. We know this is on the spot. We're not judging you of can you get the right answer in 2 seconds, but we do want to see how you think. So talk through what you're thinking instead of doing that long pause and then picking an answer at the end. It's think of it like partial credit on the tests in school. You want to show your work. So even if you get the wrong answer, you can still get partial credit.
Got you. No, it makes sense. It totally makes sense. It's it's funny. We at the end of the day, and again, this is my simple. I'm trying to simplify as much as possible. But at the end of the day, the interview process, it's really about someone selling themselves to someone else. That's ultimately what it is. And all the other layers and things we add on top of that, the nuances and make sure you do it. But at the end of it, if you strip it down to the core of what we're attempting to do, I need you to know that I'm the right person for what you need. And I think if taking that approach, and again, I get it, Mark, it's really simple, but I think that can kind of help you focus on what it is that you need to do for yourself.
You are exactly right. And I encourage both candidates and hiring managers to talk to salespeople and learn sales techniques. As a candidate, you're right. You are selling yourself. As a company, you are selling this job opening that they should work here, buy your product, your job opening, as opposed to the one next door. Right. As a candidate, you should buy this product, me, as opposed to the one next door. And it does come down to sales. And what sales means is convincing them that you are the best option. Could mean best quality, smart, reliable, hardworking, whatever dimensions they're looking at, but also de-risking, because with everyone we look at, there's always some risk. Yep. Now, the risk might be small in some cases, yep, but the risk might be, will this person be a cultural fit?
Yes.
Will this person, we have a lot of late nights because there are some emergency deadlines. This person, he says he doesn't mind staying till 10 p.m. most nights, but is he lying? Right. Is there some other issue that he seems to know this, doesn't know everything? Do I think he can pick up the rest of it? And those are the uncertainties. Now, we might say, sure, he's a smart guy. I'm pretty convinced he can. The risk is much smaller than could he do it? So always think about selling into the strengths and then understanding the concerns. In sales, we call this the objections.
Yes.
Oh, the product might not scale the way I want it. It might cost too much. It might not be reliable enough. And salespeople are always trying to understand what are the objections so they can address them. You, as the salesperson, want to understand what are the objections that realistically the hiring manager, the person interviewing you, probably won't be explicit about saying and might not even consciously realize. So you might have to take some indirect approaches to find them, but you do want to keep those in mind.
Yeah, no, well, they're important. They're key, actually, right, in terms of what you're trying to do here. And so I get it loud and clear. I know you joked earlier about these essential these skills that they don't teach you in school, right? And you're right, we're not taught them, along with the math, English, and the history. Do you recall sort of when you sort of came to that realization that these were important?
It was shortly into my career when I recognized I wanted to be a CTO. And I started to look, what is it the CTOs do and have? Because I was a good engineer. I could solve problems technically very well.
Yep.
But I saw there was more to it. And I started to pay attention to what are those other skills. It goes back, I wasn't doing this formally at the time, but informally, it's what we talked about earlier, that I looked at that role and said, what are the things I need to qualify for the role? Yes. And then what's that gap? And I realized my gap wasn't, I didn't know technology well. The gap was all these other skills. That's where I had to fill in. Yeah. And back then, we didn't have great programs like yours that we could tune into.
Right. No, well, and I think so. Thank you. First off, I appreciate that pat on the back. I'll take that. Thank you. I appreciate that. But also that process isn't something that we kind of thought a whole lot about. Like it was apply, this job I want to apply for, not what are my gaps, what do I have, what don't I have, what skills, the soft skills. It was none of that. It was just job, apply, and I got it, or I didn't get it, right? But now there's a lot more, there's a lot more thought into the process of, okay, this is what the job is. And I love job ads these days because they go beyond and say, this is what the job is. These are the types of things that you may be doing. Here are the skills that are necessary, but it allows that room for you to inject yourself, because you could have transferable skills in a different area, right? That are equally as important and valuable.
Absolutely. We unfortunately don't teach people long-term thinking.
Mm,
Now, use an analogy in our personal lives.
okay.
Most people, unfortunately, when they date, they meet someone and say, oh, yeah, you're not my type. Oh, nope, you are. Hey, great. I have fun with you. Have a good time. Yeah, we're both ready to get married and things seem good and we have similar interests. I can't tell you how many people I've met who never say, hey, before we get married, let's talk about how many kids do you want? Now, that one, people are usually explicit about that, though even then, it's surprising how many don't have that conversation. By the way, what religion might we raise our kids? Because we have different religions. But let's talk now about where we want to live, because we're living near each other today. That's how most people meet. There's some co-location.
Sure.
But in the future, do you want to live in the city or the suburbs? On the West Coast, the East Coast, the North, the South? Where do you want to retire? What happens if one of our parents gets sick?
Mm,
What's the expectation of commitment? Do we have that parent live with us? Do we move near the parent? Is there an expectation that, well, I might need to be spending 2 days a week with a parent? Oh, you didn't expect that. And you're wondering why I'm now not doing those 2 days with our kids. Let's talk through that. Now, you can't plan for every possible contingency.
right.
But by having some general conversations and understanding thinking, someone says, no, if your parent gets sick, well, that's their own damn problem. Who cares? Like, okay, maybe I can't spend 2 days a week with them, but I don't know if I just want to write them off. So let's kind of see where our values are. And the same thing for our career, that it can't just be next job, next date, next date.
Yeah.
It's be, where do I want to be in 20 years? For example, if you're in a job where you're on the road a lot,
Yep.
that's great when you're 20. I know so many kids who right out of school say, oh, this is great. I'm on flights. I'm building up those airline miles.
Yep.
And you're staying in hotels that you can't necessarily afford on your own. But when you're 45 and you've got kids at home,
Yep.
you don't want to be on the road 4 or 5 days a week.
That's right. That's right.
So think ahead. What do you want your career to be? Not just today. What's it going to be in the future? And again, you can't know every possible thing. You're not going to know, oh, there's going to be a recession in 10 years or a global pandemic.
Right. Right.
You want to think ahead.
Right, right, and really, what I love about this process, and I can connect it directly to this podcast because of the fact that this could apply to all aspects of your life. We're focusing on our career, and our conversation is very much about our career, and that's fine. But the same steps or processes or things that you do can be applied to our personal lives, which I think is amazing.
Even the other skills, we talk about negotiations, and everyone normally thinks, well, that's either when I get a job and I'm negotiating compensation, or maybe if I'm a salesperson, I negotiate. Sure. But in fact, we negotiate all the time. And it's not just with our boss. Now, we negotiate with our coworkers. We negotiate quite a lot with our family, with our spouses. Our children negotiate with us all the time. People say, oh, I'm not good at negotiation. You were probably negotiating when you were 3 years old, when your parents said, finish your vegetables. And you said, well, how about I eat 2 green beans, can I still have dessert? That was you negotiating before you knew the word. Right. So these skills, the communication, the team building, the negotiations, this is something we do throughout our lives, not just in our careers.
Gotcha. Is there one skill? I mean, I don't know if this is even a fair question, but is there one skill that's maybe more important than the other, or has more value than the other, or are they kind of all equal footing?
I get that a lot. It really depends on where you are.
Okay.
In fact, the way I wrote the book has 10 chapters, 10 skills. Now, they each stand alone. As we noted earlier, they do build upon each other. But when you think back and say, well, here's where I am for this job, and the next job I want 2 to 3 years, or maybe even 6 months, here's the skill I really need to focus. I really need to focus on leadership. Or maybe say, I'm just getting a more senior individual contributor job. It's less about leadership or management, but is more about communicating to other people. So with the book, you don't have to read it start to finish. Mm-hmm. You can jump right to the chapter you want. Beautiful. And likewise, the companion Brain Bump app, it's a free app with the tips to help reinforce them. You can just focus on certain skills, say, I'll get to the others later.
Yep.
Because when we go back to learning sports, learning basketball,
Yep.
You don't say, okay, I need to be better at passing and rebounding and free throws and everything else. We're going to spend a few weeks or a few months just focusing on this one skill. Don't worry about the others for now. We'll get to that in time. And that's what we want to do with our career.
Got you. Makes total sense. We've alluded to a couple times. We'll put out there again. The book is called The Career Toolkit, Essential Schools for Success that no one ever taught you. I love the title. It's a great title. Now in that, I see where you boast that your advice can put $30,000 in someone's pocket. That's a pretty bold claim there, Mark.
Well, that's what we were saying earlier with the negotiation tips. You just get that one little improvement. There's the cash.
There you go. I love it. I love it. I love it. This has been an awesome chat. And again, I think like oftentimes when I sort of, wind up a conversation, I sort of reflect on the thing that really got me going and got me excited. And just the whole idea of planning things out, Mark, is really what stands out for me. And being as methodical with that plan as you possibly can, and not just for the here, again, as a chess player, not just for this move, but for the future moves down the road. So I appreciate you sharing those insights. For our listeners that wanted to catch up with you, learn more about your work, where can we send them?
I'm going to give you two websites.
Okay.
The first is thecareertoolkitbook.com. More information about the book. You can follow me on social media, reach out to me with questions. But there's also that free resources page, and it has all the career questions from the book. It has this questions asked during the interview. It has a whole bunch of other free resources, all of which is at thecareertoolkitbook.com. I also mentioned the Brain Bump app.
Yes.
How often do we read a book and say, this is great, and then you forget all a few weeks later? So the Brain Bump app, completely free in the Android and iPhone stores, that has all the tips from the book. We don't check that you bought the book. You can get that for free.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.
Or you might say, I'm really focused on this one skill, maybe communication right now.
Yep.
You can set up to get a daily reminder at a time you set. We don't bother you with unrequested notifications. You say, I want every day at 10 a.m. or only Tuesdays at 2 p.m. And you just get a little pop-up with one of the things you learned. That's going to help you remember and reinforce it. So that you can get at brainbumpapp.com, 100% free.
I love it. That's a great one. I love the Brain Bump. I'm going to have to download and check it out for sure. Thank you for that. Mark, this has been a fabulous chat. Like I said, I really appreciate the insights, and the applicability in our lives is just amazing. And so thank you for that. Congratulations on sort of finding your path, because there's some work for you to get to where you are as well. It didn't just happen. And so, and I think that's worthy of acknowledgement. So congratulations. Thank you again, and all the best, my friend.
Thanks again for having me on the show.
Back right here on the podcast, and in our conversation with Mark, he highlighted the importance of continuous learning and upskilling in today's rapidly changing world. Just like as in chess, where each move matters, every skill we develop can make a significant impact on our career trajectory. Whether it's negotiation, leadership, or networking, honing these skills can unlock opportunities that pave the way for a successful career. As we wrap up today's episode, I encourage you to reflect on the insights shared by Mark and consider how you can apply them in your own journey towards audacious living. Remember, every step you take towards developing essential skills brings you closer to your goals. Thank you for tuning in to the Audacious Living Podcast, where we believe that audacity is a key to unlocking your full potential. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.